Welcome to Critical Junction, episode 13. I'm Mark.
Hello, I'm Luke.
I'm Jill.
And joining us today is our special guest, Brianna Corrigan. Hey, Bri, thanks for being here.
Hi.
So Bri is a graduate of Communications and Political Science from Ottawa U, which is awesome because today we're talking about political correctness, free speech, and the limits of tolerance. So to start off the episode, I just wanted to bring up a couple of things that recently came through the House of Commons, most notably M103 and Bill C-16. So why don't we start off with M103 since it's the most current. So M103 was a motion put forward in the House of Commons by Iqra Khalid. And it reads in part that in the opinion of the House, the government should A, recognize the need to quell the increasing public climate of hate and fear, B, condemn Islamophobia and all forms of systemic racism and religious discrimination. And it goes on for that for a little bit. Now, naturally, there was a lot of pushback from the Conservatives regarding this motion. They were saying that eventually it'll turn into a way to legislate freedom of speech. So to quote from an article from the Huffington Post, some Tories have argued that since M103 does not define Islamophobia, it could be a first step to restricting criticism of Islam. Others have argued it favors one religion over others. So what do we think of the motion, M103?
That it's just that, a motion.
Right.
It's not even a law. It doesn't dictate anything. It's just saying, hey, this might not be a good thing.
Right. See, that's where a lot of people are kind of tripping up on it because it is a private member's motion, right?
It's non-binding.
Yeah, exactly. So if anyone doesn't know what a private member's motion is, this is from the procedures book from the House of Commons. The government is not bound to adopt a specific policy or course of action as a result of the adoption of such a resolution, since the House is only stating an opinion or making a declaration of purpose. So there's no way this thing can become a law, right? So I don't understand why people are suddenly deciding, you know what, this is going to turn into, it's our first step towards, Sharia law in Canada and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I laughed at that when I saw the headline. I'm like, what? No, that's not how this works.
No, that's not how...
And any of this works.
Exactly.
It's awful.
Well, what's that expression, though? The camel's nose in the tent or something like that? Does anyone know what expression I'm talking about? But letting the camel's nose into the tent, like we'll soon lose the tent sort of thing? Like so.
Okay, like a slippery slope.
Yeah, slippery slope or letting something begin. It's the sparks of the beginning of something. So, of course, we can be fearful for that reason. But, I mean, I don't know. It's just emotion. It's not a real thing.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not a bill, it's not a law, it's not any type of legislation. It's just expressing an opinion in the House of Commons, which, conservatives, among others, and especially the quote-unquote alt-right. Well, first of all, there is no alt-right. They're Nazis and they're racists, and that's it.
They just needed to rebrand themselves, that's all.
Yeah. But yeah, there's no danger of this thing becoming any kind of law or any type of legislation. But they think it is, because people don't understand how our political system works. Yeah, there is no danger in M103 limiting free speech in any conceivable fashion.
I think it is an important motion to make, though, considering what's happening in the States.
Right.
His ridiculous travel bans the last little while, it's thinly veiled racism.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, it's racism.
It's racism.
Plain and simple. And for us being a multicultural country, I think it's very important for us to recognize that discriminating against one group only is just not right. And it's not acceptable, and we won't tolerate it.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I think the timing of the motion was a little bit unfortunate. It came after the mosque shooting in Quebec City in January. The motion was a direct result of that. But just because of the political climate around the world, I don't think now would have been the best time to put this kind of thing forward.
I think now's the best time.
I would disagree. I think it's pushing the other side to speak out and become more vocal about that kind of thing. The easiest way to get the alt-right mobilized is by doing things that they hate to the extreme. And they're seeing this as an opportunity for them to voice their racist opinions even more. The government is trying to legislate our freedom of speech and all that bullshit, right? Had this come out last year, right after the election, I think it would have been a little bit more well-received. Because at that point, the alt-right wasn't an actual thing. It wasn't considered a danger. and people weren't being as overtly racist as they are now with the election of Donald Trump in the U.S.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of sort of maybe mitigating factors, or maybe just devil's advocate type concepts that come to my mind with all of this. With regard to whether or not the motion should be blocked because it could lead to laws that restrict freedom of speech or this kind of stuff, I that's definitely not legitimate, but I think that there is some validity to the concern over the invention of the term Islamophobia, which has only existed for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. Before then, it was just called bigotry or ethnocentrism or racism. And Islamophobia kind of came out as a term to kind of specifically talk about the bigotry towards Muslims.
Are you saying it's basically become so popular that it earned its own word, sort of thing?
Well, the thing is, the first time I heard it was when it was being slung at the new atheists who were criticizing all religions, and whenever their criticism turned specifically to the topic of Islam, then they would be slurred with the label Islamophobes, right?
Okay.
Sam Harris was especially targeted because he's very vocal against radical Islam, right? He has numerous talks about the danger.
Specifically radical.
Well, he's dealing specifically with the dangers inherent within the Quran and how that facilitates extremist behavior, right? So, yeah, he's one of the new atheists, and he was targeted very specifically with the term Islamophobia, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm. And so I think there's an effect there that's not explicit, but that's definitely intentional on at least some of the people that started employing that term, and that's to chill any legitimate criticism of a deeply held dogma, So to some extent, I can understand some of the resistance to the movement because they don't like the legitimization of the term Islamophobia, which is seen, at least to some extent, as disingenuous.
Right. The conservatives were, they were against the motion very explicitly, but they did propose a change to the text of the motion itself, because they were arguing that the term Islamophobia wasn't defined. So they gave a definition, and that was one of their proposals, and it was shot down in the House, and they just kept the original wording, left it as is, and that's what sailed through the House of Commons a couple of weeks ago. And
why did they resist? Did they resist because they were worried that was a slippery slope to?
They may have. I don't know.
Delegitimizing.
We don't know
why.
The purpose of the motion.
Because it's not their bill. That's why.
Because it's not their bill. Okay. I guess that's fine. I mean, they're a majority and they can pass the bill with or without the help of the House.
That's not ours. We don't like it.
That's kind of seems to be the prevailing attitude in most politics.
I wouldn't say that's exactly not childish.
Have you watched politics lately, like politicians in action?
Seriously, 4-year-olds in
When
a
you're talking,
sandbox.
I know what it is. I just think we can still aspire to be more.
I'm a politician.
I think you're more like an Australian politician, but yeah, sure.
Bang on impression.
Rabble, 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 rabble.
I think the British do that. They do the thing halfway and drink UP.
The
jiggle the
British seem to
jowls.
have humor to their politics, though. It's almost like they're getting up to do like a comedy skit. Hey,
And we digress.
Okay, so I guess we can move on to Bill C-16 in that case. So Bill C-16 was an act to amend the Canadian Human Rights Act and Criminal Code So it reads, in part, the enactment amends the Canadian Human Rights Act to add gender identity and gender expression to the list of prohibited grounds of discrimination. The enactment also amends the Criminal Code to extend the protection against hate propaganda set out in that act to any section of the public that is distinguished by gender or gender identity or expression, and to clearly set out that evidence that an offense was motivated by bias, prejudice, or hate based on gender identity or expression constitutes an aggravating circumstance that a court must take into consideration when it imposes a sentence. So that's a whole load of legislative mumbo-jumbo just to say that they're extending protections to gender identity. Again, lots of opposition towards Bill C-16, most notably coming from psychology professor Jordan Peterson of the University of Toronto. To quote from an article in the University of Toronto's blog here, psychology professor Jordan Peterson has made headlines in the last 2 weeks claiming that the bill before the Federal House of Commons is an unprecedented attack on free speech. He's claimed that the new law will criminalize the failure to use individuals' preferred pronouns. In a rally at the University of Toronto last week, he went so far as to say that the bill is the most serious infringement of freedom of speech ever in Canada.
So he thinks because we don't call somebody by their preferred pronoun, whatever it may be, that you're going to get arrested under hate speech?
That's what he's arguing. But
well, they are suggesting, though, that, he was talking about how you can necessitate not saying things, but they're suggesting that you have to say something or else it becomes hate speech. Is this correct? Like, you have to refer to someone as this or that, or it is considered hate speech. So it is very different than anything else. Am I wrong here?
The Canadian code, like the law, is very explicit in terms of what it defines as hate speech. Like, it has to be explicitly hate speech. Like, choosing not to call someone by the preferred pronoun
is not hate speech.
No,
okay,
it isn't. But that's what Professor Peterson is arguing. Like,
So his argument is invalid.
No, but wasn't he also mixing in certain events that happened in his own classrooms, like actually in the school, where it was something like if students request that a person that the prof only refer to them using their preferred pronoun, and he misremembers it or just reverts or just chooses to stick with the general pronouns that he knows, the gender binary ones, then they can make a complaint and it'll be taken seriously, and that'll have an effect on his ability to teach. So I don't know how he's connecting it to the bigger issue of hate speech laws, where you would actually get arrested or taken to court for it. But I don't know, maybe he's got a point when it comes to how it works out in the less formal environment of whatever kind of administrative oversight they have in university, where the administration will side with a student or with a prof, depending on the case, and mete out certain consequences.
Well, let's touch on the issue of those new personal pronouns, just because this is what that's leading into. Facebook, for example, has approximately 71 pronouns to choose from whenever you're setting up a new account. So what do you guys think of that? Like, is it necessary to have all these new personal pronouns for people to identify themselves with?
Well, I for one don't think anything's necessary, but I think necessary is a really strong word. I mean, it's a choice. These people are. I guess you can't really say it's a choice. I don't know.
I think you can make a choice for yourself, but things get complicated when you're trying to make other people adhere to your choice.
I think of the example of northern communities and how they might have 30 or 40 names for snow, but we just don't understand that. Snow is the white stuff that falls from the sky, and we just call it snow. Like, we have no use.
Apparently, that's a bit of a myth.
It is a myth, yeah.
Yeah, they have good evidence. They have a bunch of different words for snow just as we do, in the sense that we have words like sleet, snow,
Snert.
ice, snert. We've also got different words for.
Okay, but in general, the
For
words
snow.
come into existence due to their use. Let's
Exactly,
say.
yeah.
So they're tool to be used, sort of thing. And so I guess in this sense, you're asking, is it necessary? No, it's not necessary. Only because nothing's necessary. But this is where I'm coming from in general. But anyways, is it like it's of use to someone? We can say. Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah.
Not necessarily to everyone.
Maybe not.
Personally, like, it doesn't. It's not that I don't care. It's just, if somebody were to ask me to call them by whatever, I would make the effort to try to call them that.
Sure.
And if I forgot, and that they were, they weren't seriously offended the first time that I forgot, and I would continue trying to call them whatever they wanted to be called. Like, it doesn't affect me, really. So I don't care if there's 71 pronouns. It doesn't affect me.
Mm-hmm.
So whether or not it's necessary is not really an issue for me. If that's what they want to be called, if that's what they're comfortable being called, if that makes them happy, I'll try.
Try out of respect.
Yeah, out of respect.
Sure,
and as long as they're respectful back and realize that, to me, growing up, there was the gender binary nouns or whatever, and I'm going to forget.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody will forget, especially a professor with 400 some odd students. I'm pretty sure he doesn't know the names of most of them, much less their personal preferred pronouns. So as long as you are accepting the fact that society might not remember to call you that, and you're willing to kind of work with that, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
You can get me to call you Snoopy. I don't care. It has no effect on me. So 72 pronouns, whatever.
But does it not become hate speech in the sense, like, is this
No,
not what
if
they're
you-
declaring?
If I
That-
willfully called you a woman when you wanted me to call you a man, just because I didn't agree with the fact that you're transitioning, I don't see that being very...
But there is
acceptable.
propaganda out there in terms of suggesting that if you get it wrong, or you use the wrong pronoun or whatever to describe me, then it becomes hate speech. Is this
Right,
not
you're
what this
you're
Jordan
committing a
guy has been accused of?
microaggression,
Yeah, yeah.
and
If you forget, you forget. If
Sure.
you willfully...
sure, but we can't see. We don't have like some kind of view screen on the back of our skulls that tell us whether or not they intended to forget or it was an accidental, a sincere accident. And so when you make rules that people are expected to adhere to, or else some third party can impose some type of consequence on them, you're getting into the weeds there. It becomes sort of a game. How close can or how much of a consensus can you build around just declaring that someone had said an intention, had some particular intention behind an act that somebody took offense to?
I think you're bringing up kind of a key point of political correctness, is there's how was it intended, right? It's
Right.
so circumstantial whether or not somebody said something to do like a microaggression to you or whatever, or if they legitimately forgot.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge part of the political correctness debate.
Yeah. In terms of what you were saying before about like not caring and how you would just comply with somebody's request of calling them by whatever
Out of
they would
respect.
like to be called, out of just basic respect, that makes total sense on like a moral level. But I'm thinking also on just a sort of a pragmatic linguistic level. I'm not sure any of this, as much as the particular niche subculture would like it to be so, and is very assiduous in inventing these 71 different pronouns. I don't think that society in general is going to necessarily modify language and how they use it just based on that kind of subculture's desire, or no matter how much they try and worm it into a formalized kind of legal.
And I think that was part of Peterson's argument. Well, he was blatantly saying, I'm just not going to do that because I think it's ridiculous. But I think in part it was due to him not, well, admitting that society, like you said, isn't going to just change because overnight they invented all these new pronouns for people to identify themselves with. Right?
It's going to take time.
In a sense, it's just not solid yet. It's still liquid.
Still fluid,
it's still fluid and changing. I find this other.
But you
weird
say
thing
still, but I think language in general is fluid and changing.
Nothing is solid.
Right.
In that
but
sense.
it's also not so much determined as it is like a descriptive thing. There's like this huge argument or sort of a feud between the prescriptivists and the descriptivists. You'll find this all over the internet, where anybody's like only basically familiar with linguistics at all, people will kind of divide themselves in these camps. But in general, language is known to be mostly a descriptive thing.
I do like the idea of describing rather than explaining.
Right.
Something.
So there's like an old-fashioned I guess paradigm where we used to get rapped on the knuckles for breaking the rules of language and things like that. That seems to have kind of died.
With
nobody does that now. Like things like I think AAVE, which is African American vernacular. Those things have been accepted as just dialects of English, whereas there was a time when people would say, people who spoke like saying axe instead of ask, or this kind of stuff, they would say that that's somebody who doesn't know how to English, But I think there's been some education that's evolved about that, and we now accept that AAVE, just like descriptively, it just is a way of speaking.
So is that the new term for Ebonics?
I think that's the non kind of facetious way of calling Ebonics.
Like some schools had classes on that particular vernacular, just to. It has its own grammar and syntax.
Right,
now.
exactly.
So it's a natural evolution of the English language in a way. I don't know. I'm not sure if these new personal pronouns are the same. Well, on the other hand, maybe they are. I don't know.
I think it's too new and too in flux yet.
Right.
I think as we go a couple more decades with this, I think it'll change. It'll solidify.
Yeah, but I don't think I don't think the idea that it's new is the problem there. I think the idea that it's trying to be contrived is the problem. Like AAVE isn't something that Black Americans actually sat down together and had like clubs or social media rooms where they determined these are the 71 ways we're gonna say ask or whatever. It just happened. It just kind of naturally evolved as part of the culture, and
whereas we're trying to enshrine these personal pronouns into law.
That's it, and I think it's kind of a fool's errand. I don't think it's actually gonna get any kind of foothold.
So in that sense, it's like recycling. It's just hiding. It's hiding the problem. It's not actually doing anything. It's like creating this idea that we are doing something, but we're really not doing anything. Yeah, like like I'm thinking of political correctness, and I see it as an incomplete strategy to social change. Like I see it as it's in a sense being a bully. And when we look at something like bully,
a cry bully,
yeah, and it's just kind of a rude approach to social change. So I see it as an incomplete approach. It's not taking the right idea. It's in a sense being fascist about fascists. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, on that note, let's talk about safe space at universities for a second, because I think
mate.
As a recent graduate of the millennial age, I'm sorry. I apologize for my entire generation and the concept of safe spaces.
Yeah, I feel so lucky. I just missed this whole
I'm-
era.
okay, a university is a safe space. The entire frickin' university is a safe space.
Yeah.
You are allowed to voice opinions in a university where you would not normally be able to voice them, like anywhere else. Like in the workplace, you couldn't talk about religion, you couldn't talk about sex, you couldn't talk about whatever. It's not workplace appropriate, but at a university, it's completely appropriate. You also have the right to be shot down because that's what free speech is. But the entire campus is a safe space. So this concept of creating a place where nobody's going to hurt you is not a safe space. That's just being, you don't want anybody to disagree with you. That's all that is. That's just hiding.
Right. Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Yeah, like Luke was, like you were just saying, Luke, it's like being a bully to people you don't, you know, like you're threatening people because they might get offended, right? You can't say that because someone's going to get offended and then everyone's going to lose their minds.
Hang on though. So I think we're taking, so the core of political correctness back before it was taken to this level of shenanigan works. And I think it's a good thing. Because by telling people, or at least suggesting that, calling people certain names. Okay, so let's look at mental illness, for example. We used to call people mentally retarded. That's not a good word. Because we've evolved a little bit and realized that calling people mentally retarded is derogatory. We no longer want to see people with mental illness like that. So we change the way we talk about them because our words have meaning. They're powerful. Certain words that we use to describe people changes how we think of them. So we've basically said, okay, to be politically correct or to be respectful, you shouldn't call someone a mental retard. You need to call them mentally ill. At its core, in that concept, changing how we talk about people in order to change our societal norms makes sense. It's when people take it to the extreme that it becomes bullying. And it's gone completely off the rails in the last 5 years.
I still feel like the idea of political correctness, even if it is approaching something that may be more correct or something like that, or advantageous to society, it still seems crude, rude.
Well, it's negative. It was always used as negative.
Yeah.
Like it started to be used in the 70s and 80s by leftists to basically call out people that were overly dogmatic. And then the right kind of hijacked it and used it as an insult. It was always negative. It's never been a positive term. The word correctness on its own implies that you know better than everybody else.
Right.
So it's inherently a negative term. I believe anyway, at its core, the concept to it works and makes sense. It's just how we've taken it to basically include every single little slight and microaggression and called it political correctness. And it's also how it's been framed. It was hijacked by the right in order to attack leftists. So how it's been framed in the last couple of years has made it extremely negative.
It's become more extremist, I guess.
Oh, hugely.
Yeah.
So at its core, I don't think it's a negative subject.
It doesn't
We've just
have to
made
be
it
negative?
Exactly.
Right.
We've just made it negative.
It's presented, in a sense, it's in its presentation. It's
Yeah.
It's impolite, it's rude, it's crude,
It's an insult. You call someone politically correct, it's an insult.
So there are two extremes of the spectrum. There are the ultra leftists who are completely politically correct and will just get offended at the drop of a hat if someone calls them by the wrong pronoun. On the other hand, you have the extreme right who will mock those people and say they're special little libtard snowflakes.
Trump! Sorry.
And both sides are just feeding off of each other and creating the spectacle of politically correct versus the illusion that there is no longer any free speech. And well, that leads me to my next question of, do you think there should be limits? Or what's the limit to acceptance? Are there limits to things that we are willing to accept as a society? You know, is there a limit to tolerance? Or should there be?
I was thinking on the way here that there's a difference between being patient and being tolerant. In a sense, there's never a reason to be tolerant of anything that we see as not being something that is good. Like, why would we be tolerant of Hitler pointing a gun at someone's head? Why would we be tolerant of that? Why? You know, we in a sense want to immediately attack the thing that we feel is not good or not the best. I don't know how to place that. I always try to speak without saying good or bad, sort of thing.
Well, this actually goes right to a quote that I thought would be exactly apt to the conversation. It's by Karl Popper, who was famous in philosophy of science, and he came up with something called the paradox of tolerance. And what he said was, less well known is the paradox of tolerance. Unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance. If we extend unlimited tolerance even to those who are intolerant, if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be destroyed and tolerance with them. In this formulation, I do not imply, for instance, that we should always suppress the utterance of intolerant philosophies, as long as we can counter them by rational argument and keep them in check by public opinion suppression would certainly be unwise. But we should claim the right to suppress them if necessary, even by force, for it may easily turn out that they are not prepared to meet us on the level of rational argument, but begin by denouncing all argument. They may forbid their followers to listen to rational argument because it is deceptive and teach them to answer arguments by the use of their fists or pistols. We should therefore claim, in the name of tolerance, the right not to tolerate the intolerant. We should claim that any movement preaching intolerance places itself outside the law, and we should consider incitement to intolerance and persecution as criminal, in the same way as we should consider incitement to murder or to kidnapping or to the revival of the slave trade as criminal.
What do we think of that?
It makes sense. I think it's the same thing as free speech. You have the right to say whatever you want, but you also have the right to be condemned for what you say. If you will go against what people think, what society thinks is morally correct, you have the right to be condemned for what you say. You have the right to say whatever you want, but be prepared to be attacked. We should not shut down speech entirely and say that, well, you cannot talk about this subject. You are allowed to talk about it in whatever way you want, but be prepared for the consequences of it.
Sure. But at the same time, I don't think we should legitimize sort of just a conventional condemnation, like one that's completely unreasoned or for which the reasoning is no longer required.
Yes.
I think if somebody says something that's just terrible, we should be able to say that it's terrible,
and
but
why.
also why.
Yes.
You know, and I think to some extent the people who are saying terrible things, they somewhat have a right to have what the terrible things they're saying be demolished critically and validly, rather than just
Emotions.
and ridicule or whatever.
Yep. No, yeah, totally, 100%.
So I guess that brings us back a little bit to the idea of safe space in universities. Because, like we were saying, they have created this little bubble within, the sphere of the university where they're being completely sheltered from anything that might be considered offensive.
Which is not what universities are about.
No, universities are supposed to be an open forum where you can discuss whatever idea that you want openly. And like you said, you can have that idea completely shut down, but that's part of the deal, right? And limiting that kind of thing by creating safe space areas or whatever is counter to the idea of the university culture.
Yeah, not just a university culture. I think it's kind of paradoxical actually for people to come to university expecting to be able to assert their right think or something, because it presumes that they already have the right answer when they're in university in the first place to get educated. They're there to take the humble position of a student, a learner, not to assert some certitude about whatever moral dogma that they think is right.
I have this feeling, though, that this entire thing, this younger generation and how critical we are of them, I mean, it makes sense that they're critical of the older folks because we did fuck up the world, right? Like, they're pissed.
Yeah, but they're not critical. They're just...
No, I know.
They're just stuck in some completely atavistic kind of boo-hurrah kind of mode.
You're right.
They're not actually able or capable of verbalizing the reasoning for their disagreement.
But what I'm saying is
because they to some extent I've heard them explicitly denounce reasoning and argumentation as a way of disagreement. I've heard people call it bourgeois.
Well, hold on. So they're
to use like enlightenment kind of reasoning, critical
It's
thinking
a violent way
techniques.
of attacking somebody, is what they call
Yeah,
it.
but what are they eschewing reason and rationality in
making
favor
sense is an attack.
Well, no, arguing with somebody is violent, and it shouldn't be done that way.
Right. But what I'm trying to get at is like, what are they replacing reasoned argument with?
They're replacing it with just pure denunciation based on whether or not something conforms to a prejudged correct morality.
How recent?
Mark's pissed.
How recent of a thing is this? Because I
have a story.
I can't fathom that.
Not in terms of argumentation, but in terms of how recent this is. Back in 2011, I think, there was a student named Omar Mahood. He was at the University of Michigan, and he was an author or writer for their local paper, and he wrote this fantastic article called Do the Left Thing. It's a satirization of all of these, like the colonialist issue, everybody's against the cis, white, dominant, whatever person, right? It's against all of this political correctness stuff. So we posted this piece of satire, and it actually starts with the words trigger warning in cap locks, which makes me chuckle. And for posting this, he was fired for creating a violent workplace. And then his dorm was egged, and he was basically littered with copies of his column, scrawled with messages like, "You scum embarrass us," by the way, punctuation and grammar, "Shut the fuck up," and do you even go here, ? And leave. And they posted these pictures of a demon and splattered eggs all over his dorm room. So he was having
he
a
wrote
humoristic
his proposal and,
he was having a humoristic discussion about how far we've gone with this stuff. And the Do the Left Thing is a story of this left-handed student who falls down, and this male white student tries to help him up, but he automatically gives him his right hand, and the guy is triggered because he's like, "Oh my god, I understand now. All you right-wing people, right-handed people, you're against the lefties, right?" It's fantastic piece.
It's written as obviously as
Oh
possible.
no, I can read a bit of it.
It's sort of like a modest proposal.
Right. That's exactly what I thought of. I kept on thinking Taylor Swift. No, what's that guy's name?
It's hysterical.
Taylor Swift.
It's not Taylor Swift.
Jonathan
it's
Swift.
Jonathan Swift. Thank you.
Taylor Swift.
All that. I'll read a bit of it for you, and it's so obvious that it's tongue-in-cheek. So it starts off with trigger warning. "It was one of the coldest days of this winter past, and I was hurrying along the diag to class. The blistering cold did not turn my eyes from all the white privilege falling around me. All those white snowflakes falling thick upon the autumn leaves, burying their colors. Majoring in women's studies, I've learned that oppression comes in many forms. Sometimes we fail to notice it because it's just everywhere, just like that white snow. As I walked, I slipped on a patch of wet leaves lining the steps to the hatcher, and I fell forward headfirst into the steps of the library. If it hadn't been for the left hand that I thrust out right before my fall, I would have ended up just another statistic in the war on colored people. As it were, a white, cisgendered, hetero upperclassman came down the steps just as I was falling. He looked at me with that white man's burdened face that I see too often in this radicalized campus. Cold, isn't it? Behind those words, I sensed a patronizing sneer, as if he expected me to be a spokesperson for my whole race. He offered his hand to help me up, and I thought to myself how this might be a manifestation of the patriarchy patronizing me. I doubt he would have said those violent words had I been white, but he would take any opportunity to patronize a colored man or woman. People on this campus always box others based on race. Triggered, I waved his hand aside and got up on my own accord. He was taken aback. Suddenly, I felt I was taking back some of that lost agency that colonialism had robbed my people of. I felt like Amar Khan and Lagan. That's right, that white man wasn't about to tax me. I didn't even want to be that white. I turned on my heels and showed him my back. And the entire thing is like that. Like, it's obviously meant as satire.
That is fucking brilliant.
Oh, you've got to read the rest of it. And he freaks out that he gives him his left hand. It's brilliantly done. And he uses every term correctly. So it's obviously a well-researched piece of satire. But because he's making fun of something that is so ingrained in the university culture now, he was demonized for it. Like, all he wanted to do was open a discussion on how far we've taken this, and he's demonized for it. And like you said, you have the right to say whatever you want, but you shouldn't be hit or accosted without reason. And that was definitely without reason. Nothing in here is at all insulting to anybody.
Oh, that's really funny.
It's hysterical, and it's so well done. But for that, he was fired.
Wow.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It seems to me that people that are criticizing this type of thing are basically stopping at no.
Yeah, and
No.
they
And
don't.
discussion stops there, and that's it. Like, so in that sense, I feel like it is just a phase that we're going through right now with this political correct movement, and that it will go on to another phase. Like, in a sense, there'll be a consolidation here. We'll look at things and we'll evolve past this. Like, I'm looking at this in the Hegelian fashion, that it will go on to another antithesis sort of thing.
Well, I think we're seeing the antithesis of it right now.
Oh, yeah.
With the alt-right and that whole movement. And, like, Trump being elected as president is a clear demonstration of people being fucking fed up with ultra political correctness. And that
Yeah,
type
at the
of
same time,
mentality.
I think that can be overstated. It kind of really pisses me off, these people that point to the left and say, you're the reason Trump got
I'm not
elected.
saying they're the...
No. The fucking assholes on the right are who actually cast a vote
Of course.
for the, like, a priori, evidently awful candidate.
Right. I'm not saying they're entirely... The left is entirely
The left are not like geniuses that are capable of manipulating everyone on the right.
Right.
To
Don't say
No,
Let them know.
But I think it is a pushback, though. It's definitely a pushback to it.
Okay, it's part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
But I never said it was the entire
Yeah,
reason. But
okay.
yeah, it is part of it.
But I don't want it overstated.
Right.
He used political correct. He used some of the oldest tricks in the book in terms of language. Like, he used political correctness to shut down criticism, to shut down debate. And I have a fantastic quote here from a Guardian article. He was being more outrageous than any candidate could ever be possible, right? And that basically ensured like nonstop media coverage, which helped him attract supporters. It's an oldest trick. Moira Weigel says in her article, it's an old trick. The powerful encourage the less powerful to vent their rage against those who might have been their allies and to delude themselves into thinking that they have been liberated. It costs the powerful nothing. It pays frightful dividends. And that's exactly what he did. He used political correctness, anti-political correctness, to basically rally his followers against the other, against this powerful force that's trying to shut him down, the biased media, the what is it, the once, how did he say that? He threw it out in 3 speeches. It was the once good National Post or something like that. Like, he calls them the once...
Once credible or something.
the once credible something or other paper, yeah.
National Post?
Not National Post.
No, you mean the
it was
Washington Post.
Washington Post, yeah.
Right.
He nailed them a couple times.
Yeah.
The Watergate guys.
So I hate to give him any sort of credit, but he actually used it very well. And he used it to shut down any sort of debate against what he was saying. Like, what was it? Somebody from one of the magazines stood up and asked him, what are you going to do about women? Like, how are you going to change the war on women? And she says, it's Fox News, unfortunately, Fox News reporter, and she says, you've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. He once told a contestant on Celebrity Apprentice it would be a pretty picture to see her on her knees. And his reply was, I think the big problem this country has is being politically correct. I've been challenged by so many people. I need to learn to flip a page faster. I don't frankly have time for political correctness, and to be honest with you, the country doesn't have time either. He uses it like a threat
Well,
to shut down anything.
I think in that example, there's a huge difference between being politically correct and being a fucking dick.
Oh yeah, he's a racist bigot.
Yeah. Well, okay, just turning very, very briefly to
If nothing else, he exploits racism and bigotry.
Yeah.
Of course he does.
But turning very briefly to the idea of cultural appropriation and quote-unquote whitewashing. With the release of the new Ghost in the Shell movie, they're accusing the producers and creators of it of whitewashing the characters by casting Scarlett Johansson as the main character. What do you think of that? Is there reason to be offended at that?
Ghost in the Shell wasn't originally set in Japan.
Or whatever.
Just FYI.
Yeah.
So for it to be...
There you go, end of argument, pretty much. Yeah.
I think it's just a money thing. Like Scarlett Johansson will draw the crowd. Like, I mean, it's no, I don't know.
But I remember somebody criticizing Ridley Scott for whitewashing when he made his what was it, Gods of Egypt? I think not too long ago he made this movie that was Exodus, and it was with like Christian Bale and who else was in there? Christian Bale and. Anyway, so it was all white actors,
right.
And they're all playing Egyptians and presumably Semitic Jews,
Right.
of the time, and so somebody was trying to make the argument that you actually hire the actors that are going to draw the audience, that are actually going to bring in the bucks, and then the person was like. Oh yeah, I mean, nobody can deny the white-hot star power of this guy. And it's like one of these actors that we see in quite a few movies, but nobody really knows
Like
his
Ray
name. I think it was
Winston
like
or something like
Joel
that.
Edgerton or something like that. Yeah.
Just some random dude.
The white-hot star power of Joel Edgerton.
Hollywood is pretty darn white. Like, there's not a lot of representation.
Yeah, but
There's
so is
definitely problems.
America.
No, but I mean,
actually.
there's definitely problems in Hollywood. Hollywood's not setting a very good example of
Right.
how to be compassionate towards the world and
No.
lead a nice world or whatever.
And you know what? I think culturally we're actually making loads of progress in at least from my perspective.
Well,
from my
okay.
perspective, when I'm looking at all of these shows that I'm all of the newer TV shows that I'm streaming and newer movies, you just get a lot more diversity that's just kind of unspoken, and it doesn't feel contrived anymore already.
I was thinking about it in terms of, I think the four of us, we can say, don't necessarily like politically correctness at all, but I think you possibly brought up this idea that it did actually do something. Like, it has brought up issues and it has educated. It's just, I mean, from my perspective anyways, it doesn't seem to be it's not very kind about it. It's not very nice. But I mean, it did work though, right? Politically correctness is working. It has educated society. It has improved.
It serves a purpose, but
I think it's one tactic in like a quiver of tactics,
right. But yeah, like it does serve a purpose. It's, exactly like you said, to bring up issues within society and address them head on. But at the same time, it's easy for it to just be taken to the extreme, which is what we're seeing in a lot of circumstances.
Well,
But do we not have to go to extremes for social change?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, no. But I mean, in a lot of cases,
humans do tend to. We're like light switches. There's not exactly much in between. We're either like super involved or we just don't care. Like, there's not a lot in between for humans. So I think it's the same thing with feminism. Like, we fought and fought and fought and fought for it. And then we got the vote and whatever. Now people have kind of taken it a little far. And now there's kind of the anti-feminist movement, right? It'll eventually sort of back out, but we did need to go that far in order to get where we are and to continue to raise the issues that women have.
So do you think it's the same with political correctness?
I think so. I think for a lot of it is we tend to go extreme, or people take it extreme, and then it's kind of bounces back.
and then it comes back. It's the Hegelian argument, the dialectic process of everything. It kind of it does make sense.
We don't do things easily. Like, humans don't change. easily.
Change hurts. We
Yeah.
could also look at it that way, right?
Somebody's always going to be butthurt about somebody doing something. Like, somebody's not going to like a transgendered man using the woman's bathroom. Of course, they're going to be morally insulted on it. But we're going to make a stink of it until it's normal, until nobody cares. And people are going to make fun of us making a stink of it.
It's kind of funny to state it that way, though. We're going to make a stink about it until nobody cares.
It's true.
And that's the ultimate goal. We want to not care. You know,
It's going to be a normalization.
Eventually, like, what we do with our genitals and what our genitals look like will not matter, and that's our aim here.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah, no, but that is true. It's kind of a funny thing that we need to be so exact so that eventually we just don't give two shits what my cock looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
And what I do with it.
And I think it's also that we see the extreme, or we think it's more extreme than it is, because pieces on political correctness are cheap. And they're easy, and they're money bringers. So of course,
And they
publish it.
themselves are exploited.
Exactly, and they exploit it. So, like, for example, I bemoan the safe space concept, but throughout my 3 years of university, I had maybe one instance of ridiculous political correctness. But I've heard of quite a few coming from my university itself, like the whole canceling the yoga thing because it was
just gonna
cultural
talk about
appropriation
that.
at the University of Ottawa, right?
Yeah.
That's taking it really, really far. But I never really had any experience with political correctness. Like, we talked about exporting democracy, we talked about misogyny, we talked about a lot of those tough topics, genocide, the war in the Middle East, how that came about. And there wasn't a lot of people jumping down the professor's throat about not having trigger warnings. Like, it just wasn't a thing. But it's reported a lot.
I think of comedians and how basically comedians are going out there going, I ain't doing a comedy show
I
at
ain't
the
doing
campus.
colleges anymore.
We're
Yeah,
not-
like
they're not doing
Seinfeld
colleges
and,
anymore. They refuse. Like, it's
Yeah.
But there's
things-
always like 20 students that make a stink. It's not the full campus.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's just
that's
a
right.
bunch
Yeah,
of...
it's a vocal
Yeah, but
minority.
it's how much of a stink. Like, one
Yeah.
student
Yeah.
can take a real fucking nasty shit, like, and it smells up the entire campus. Like, let's just face it. You know?
Yeah, I mean, like,
One
those-
person can do that.
It's all those black bean burgers, man.
that vocal minority was enough to shut down the yoga thing.
Yeah, for a little while, yeah.
Yeah.
It was yoga for, like, disabled people.
I'm offended.
I know, I was looking at it as, like, it was, I think it
Wow.
was yoga to help with, like, physical coordination and stuff for students that were disabled on campus.
It's a technique, for Christ's sake.
Exactly.
Like,
It's not cultural
uh,
appropriation. It's not colonization.
Yeah.
Or colonialism or whatever. It's
That's
just,
right.
it works. So we like
that
it. Hey,
idea
we're
of cultural
celebrating.
appropriation, it kind of completely denies the concept of syncretism, cultural syncretism.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, we're like in a global world now,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Everybody's able to talk with everybody else, no matter where they are on the globe.
Yeah.
And yet we're not supposed to be able to trade and share in, or just naturally kind of subconsciously adopt common cultural practices, right?
Right.
Have you heard of some of these people who take offense that people with dreadlocks are culturally
yeah.
appropriating
Well,
the
there
Rastafarians?
was a big viral
Yeah.
event about that where it's not, I think it was Berkeley or something like that, right?
Yeah,
where
yeah, you're
some,
right. I think it was
white
Berkeley.
kid with dreads was accosted in the stairwell
Oh, I heard that, yeah.
by a black student, and the guy was accused of cultural appropriation, and it went to the point where there was like a physical altercation. Like she tried to grab him, wouldn't let him like leave.
So someone being racist about being racist. is
Yeah,
essentially what that
exactly.
was.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
ridiculous. Like, it's
Yeah.
the whole bully the bully. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
And it's against their ultimate goal. Like you said, if you want to breed tolerance, breed understanding, right? Share
Yeah,
your
man.
cultures.
Compassion.
Experience. Yeah. If you don't understand,
Yeah, whatever
another
happened to
culture-
modeling? Right, modeling behavior, modeling modeling what you consider to be moral actions, and instead what we get is this kind of perverse adoption of the tactics of that which you're trying to
Exactly.
criticize, which
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, I guess that's why I view this whole political correctness as, in a sense, a very youth-oriented. It's kids.
It is very easy.
It's kids who think things are solid, trying to
it's
make everyone
naive
think
certitude.
things are solid.
It's
kind of thing.
just indulging youthful prejudice and youthful.
Universities, though, are a bubble. Like, when you're at university, you think you know everything,
Right.
but in reality, you know shit about shit. And you're in this little this little bubble where a lot of people are left leaning and everybody kind of agrees with you, and you feel like you're on top of the world, and you get in the world and you realize you don't know anything. So I think that's why universities are kind of that key breeding point, is they're cultural bubbles.
But this is also the age too, where I would think at the university level, where you are becoming disillusioned as well. So you have to face yourself at that point and be disappointed, like you're facing that disappointment.
You should be, but most of us aren't.
No, that comes later.
Yeah, big time.
It's when they graduate and then they go, oh,
The crushing realities of life
and
suddenly
then you
descend
realize
upon
that you got 30 grand in debt. There are no jobs. You're probably not retiring, and there's pretty much just contract work out there. Congratulations, you've graduated. Now leave.
Where's your safe space now?
Yeah, right. You may be able to buy a car, not a house, maybe a car.
Home ownership. Yeah, sorry, that's a pipe dream.
If you play your cards right, you can live in that car.
Oh yeah. I'm getting a Winnebago.
Not in Washington, though. I think they outlawed
Yeah,
you can't live in a car in Washington anymore.
They passed a law.
Yeah, I know. It's universities are they're a special place.
I like this idea, though, that you present that the entire campus is a safe haven.
It is. It's supposed to
and
be.
it really is, yeah. Because I used to work at Ottawa U doing some of the landscaping and emptying the garbages and stuff like that. And man, yeah, there's no dangers there. Like, I'm driving around collecting garbages, and these kids are not looking both ways before they cross the street in the middle of the night with their Walkmans on. Like, they are just walking into the street, and they are safe. Like, we are not hitting them, you know? Like, they, yeah.
It's meant to be a safe space.
And it is. And you can
But that's not the sense in which the safe space that everybody is kind of up in arms about is meant. A safe space means like freedom from criticism, freedom...
freedom from being offended.
Freedom from dissenting ideas.
Right, exactly.
Which is what a university is supposed to be.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a
freedom
melting pot
from
of
being
ideas.
offended.
Yeah, that's what it was. That's what safe spaces is freedom from being offended. Same thing with trigger warnings. The professors are supposed to tell you that you're going to come up against content that might trigger a previous episode. So anything like misogyny or talking about the war in the Middle East, you're supposed to have trigger warnings because it could affect some of the immigrant students in your class. And most of the professors are like, no.
The term trigger warning really bothers me because it's
a psychological term.
It triggers you.
Technical
I'm
term.
triggered right now.
Triggered right now. Mark's triggered. Listen to this guy.
But like the trigger warning is supposed to be something geared specifically toward people suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
Right. Which has to be diagnosed.
Yes. Like they can actually be triggered and have a relapse into whatever caused that trauma.
Well, yeah.
Right?
But it is very possible that, in a sense, the younger generation all have PTSD at this point.
But they don't. But they don't.
But they think they do.
They think they do.
Because now PTSD is trendy.
But like these safe
But
spaces.
what I mean is eventually
because
there
now
will be a
being made
difference.
angry and being offended is equivalent to being re-traumatized. There's like a
It's a great act of violence.
creeping of
They're equating
of the meaning.
They're equating of being offended to someone who served in the Gulf War and has shell shock.
Well, that's it. The worst thing about it is that it completely minimizes the actual condition. Like
that's why it bothers me so much. Yeah. I just think it's, I think it's ridiculous.
It is. I'm going to put this out there though. Is the younger generation acting like this because of how my generation was raised?
It might be.
The whole concept of participation medals, like parenting,
helicopter parenting
definitely changed. Like 100% it changed. Mind you, I'm a rural kid, right? So I was booted out the door at 8 o'clock in the morning. Go play, don't kill yourself, right? We different mentalities. It's just you're gonna get into trouble on a farm. You're not. There's no way you can't do it. But like urban kids, they're kept inside. Don't play out in the street. Don't do this. Don't do that. And they're very protected. And their parents tell them, like, you don't have to be in a situation where you feel uncomfortable. You can play it safe. You can be safe. And if you're not feeling safe, tell your professor, or tell your teacher, or tell your mom, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Does it come from that?
I think in large part it does.
It makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Just because of, like you said, the whole involvement parenting thing and helicopter parenting and like medals for participation and attendance and things like that, making everyone feel like they're special when in reality everyone is just fucking average,
Yeah,
right?
seriously.
Odds are your child is not special. They don't have a gift. They're not going to do anything spectacular with their lives. They're just going to be an average fucking kid, right? So don't treat them like they're like a unique little, to use the alt-right terminology, a unique little snowflake. Because they're not. They're not fragile. They're kids.
Yeah,
And
it's
if
weird that we're deliberately breeding narcissism.
Right. Yeah.
That's essentially what we're doing.
Let kids be kids. Let them hurt themselves so they can grow up and learn not to do the thing that hurt them.
Exactly.
Yeah, learn that there are limits. Learn that they have limits.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah.
I don't agree, though, that they are unique. It just doesn't matter.
Everybody's unique, so nobody's unique. Damn it.
It just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Everyone's a different snowflake, but who gives a shit? Like,
Right.
what does it make? What does it add up to? And whatever. It's
true.
a bunch of big
But I
pile
mean,
of fucking snow.
Aside even
as you're not
from
yelling.
the attitude of giving everybody a prize for showing up, there's also some jurisdictions I've heard that actually make it illegal to give kids the kind of freedom that maybe I had when I was a kid.
Really? Like in what way?
Moving play structure.
I heard there was like an 8-year-old that was stopped by a police officer in a park, something like 2 blocks away from his house.
Oh yes.
And the parents were actually charged or fined or
Yes.
something.
It was their backyard.
It was
wasn't-
literally their backyard.
Yeah, they let the kid play in their backyard, and they got a call from, I think, Children's Services or something, being like, "You're neglecting your kid."
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. There was a 3-year-old playing naked in the sprinkler in their front lawn. Like the parent is watching them through the window. Child services called.
Right.
Child negligence. You're not watching it.
So they're the problem. There is like actual institutions and
Legislation.
and legislation and like these superstructures that are actually legitimizing something that really should be argued for before it's adopted, but it doesn't, and it definitely doesn't stand up to scrutiny. So why is it being adopted at that level? I don't get
I
it.
think it's litigation culture, right?
Right.
If you make a law on it, and you've done something about it,
Yeah.
you can't be charged for it. It's the same thing with the caution hot on your coffee. I'm sorry if you need to be told that your coffee is hot, you have brain damage. But in
Retarded.
order, mentally ill.
Slow.
But you know what?
But yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was actually going off on a tangent. So
But yeah, there's a story behind it. There's a reason that there's caution hot because somebody got burnt and then sued someone.
Yeah,
I
it's the
think
same
it's the same
reason.
reason.
It's the same reason there's a label on the soda machine not to rock it back and forth because it might tip over. Someone tipped that thing over at some
every
point,
warning
which
label has a
necessitated
story.
the sticker.
Yeah.
Like, don't do something stupid. When do we become a society of people being like complete idiots to necessitate that type of legislation?
When we canceled natural selection. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
no.
Natural selection was canceled. I didn't get the memo. I don't know.
Alrighty. Well, I think. Are there any final thoughts on the issue of political correctness? Luke, do you have anything you would like to close with? Aside from your horse noises.
Well, closing thoughts. I think I've said most of everything. I can't think. I don't know. I don't know. I think we've covered a lot of bases here. I feel like we're all sort of in agreement that we don't like it.
I don't like the extreme
How
examples.
it's presented.
Yeah, I don't like how it's presented to the extreme in certain circumstances. I think there are certain uses where political correctness can serve a purpose. But I think taking it to the level that the safe space people have done is just going completely off the rails and is really minimizing its effectiveness.
Yeah. Like, I guess I associate it with, the snitch. The kid in the classroom going, "I'm telling teacher." You know?
Right.
So sure it works, but fuck you. You know. So I guess that's how I feel about it, but at the same time, it has brought up awareness, right? But I guess it's really just, is there not a better way? And there has to be a better way, and I'm an advocate of compassion and actually caring, you know.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is something, and I have to say that I care about all life. So I can't really say no to this completely. But I bring up this idea of tolerance. No, I am not going to be tolerant, but I will be patient, you know. But there's a difference. So I guess that's my final thought there.
Jill, parting words?
I mean, yeah, I'm an advocate of reason and critical thinking, like our podcast's title kind of tips its fedora to, right? I think that the extremes that we've been critical of in our conversation here, I think those are sort of an explicit abandonment of intellectual honesty and of sort of valid argument, right? And I don't think that should be tolerated.
Well, anything that closes off discussion is, I was going to say bad, but I don't want to use good
It's
and bad
dangerous.
as language.
It's dangerous.
It's suggesting that something is solid, and it's just not. Things are not. That's not how things go. Like things continue, you know.
Right. Yeah. Bree, you get the last word.
Like I said, I'm pretty much in agreement with you guys. I 100% believe in, what is it? I think it's Voltaire that says, "I disapprove of what you have to say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it." Right, and I think that works for political correctness too. Like you have the right to call people whatever you want, but you might get some flack for it. But shutting down discussion entirely is it's downright dangerous. It hurts democracy. It hurts.
And it's dumb. I mean, it leads to a dumbing down of everyone who wants to participate in...
Still going to use that word.
Yeah, there you go. A cultural retardation.
Yeah, it does. And
because you're removing the opportunity to actually train yourself to think critically and to be able to demolish somebody else's position on a logical level and on on the level of any validity.
I think we've seen what happens when that becomes a thing, and it's a tangerine shit gibbon that currently leads our partners down south. So generally not a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an absolutely fascinating discussion. This has been Critical Junction episode 13. I'm Mark.
I'm Luke.
I'm Jill.
Bree, thanks so much for being here. It was great having you here. I hope to have you on the show again.
Good.